Says it's recording. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate your time. Just to provide some context for those that will be watching this during National Reconciliation Week, the fund wanted to have the opportunity to speak to some of our Indigenous members about reconciliation. So to provide context, my name is Leah Bennett. I'm the Indigenous Liaison Leader at the Fund and also the co-chair of our Reconciliation Action Plan. I think when I think about reconciliation, the most important thing is how do we bring along Indigenous peoples and the community on the journey? So I guess, in a sense, it seems really fitting that we have three of our members here today. I'd like to first, before we start, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am today, the Dooral peoples, and I pay respects to the traditional custodians where you are today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So David, we've met before in person. Yes, that was last year during COVID, so that was very interesting times. So I'm so excited that we get to meet again today. Hopefully in future we'll all get to meet in person. So I'd like to discuss, actually I'd like you all to kind of just go around and talk a little bit about, I guess, how you got into the field that you're in today, a little bit about your background. We might start with you, Julie. Because I did a little bit of stalking.
Okay.
And actually found an interview that you had done, I think it was for National Reconciliation Week or NAIDOC Week a few years ago. And you told a story about how you'd actually started in women's prison, teaching people to read and write. So if maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how you got into what you're doing now.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Leah. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that I'm sitting on at the moment, the land of the Darug people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So yes, my name is Julie Waddell, and I have the privilege of working with all of the dioceses across New South Wales. By trade, I'm actually a primary school teacher, and I started a very long time ago, and I've always worked in Greater Western Sydney. So my last teaching position was at Kingswood South, which is near Penrith, and I have had a number of different roles, and I actually injured myself, and that's how I ended up where I am. So in a classroom, I hurt my back quite badly and knew that I wasn't able to teach full time anymore. So I'd always identified, my brother was the head of Aboriginal legal rights in Adelaide. We have quite a, traumatic background in regards to things that have happened in our family. And I always had a passion for social justice. And so when I knew that I couldn't teach anymore and I'd been under work cover, and I sort of started thinking outside the box and thought, how can I make a bigger difference? So I was lucky enough to work at Dilwinia Women's Prison for 12 months, teaching Aboriginal women how to read and write. And for some of those ladies, they had been in and out of custody from a very young age. Most of them had left school by the time they were 10. So for them, it was, we were able to have them enrolled with partnership with TAFE, and they were able to achieve a Cert 3, which was really exciting for them because they'd not had any formal education up from that point. And then from there, I went to Western Sydney University as an academic advisor in the Badinami Centre. And that was very, very rewarding as well. But I miss kids. So I thought, all right, what will I do next? And I had to make the decision to leave the Department of Education. And I saw a job. I was working at TAFE, at TAFE Digital, which is called now, which was actually O10, as an Aboriginal education coordinator for a number of years, just as a casual. And then I saw the job with Catholic Education as a specialist teacher with the Jarrah Indigenous Education Unit. And I started here in August 2016. So, and over that time, there's been a lot of change within in our unit, and I was privileged enough to become the leading teacher within Gerrara. So, yeah.
Wow, thanks, Julie. What do you think draws you to, I guess, literacy in a sense? Because there's, I mean, like you've said, like your brother is doing work in a similar field, like when it comes to this kind of thing, like human rights and all that sort of stuff. Why literacy?
For me to answer, or
for you? Yeah.
I think it's about empowerment, especially for women, like, you know, women who have been, you know, impacted by intergenerational trauma from domestic violence, and it's helping them to empower to know that there are pathways, there are opportunities, and it sort of builds their confidence too, because the shame around this is quite significant, and it's really sad in that context. And we know that, you know, our recidivism rates are so horrendous. And I can remember one of the saddest moments was that I would go back and visit some of the girls, and when I got there, one of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life, she had huge trauma anyway, and she said to me, she said, Jules, she said, I just want to learn to read and write. And then, because she was a poet, absolutely amazing. And sadly, when I went back, not only was she back in jail, but her mother was in jail, her daughter was in jail, and her granddaughter was in jail. And it was not being able to access the supports because of the shame around not being able to read and write, how to actually have the confidence to go and ask people for help, and know that there are avenues for support which they didn't think that they could access. And that was a really sad day for me. And it was at that point, Jeannie said to me, Jewel, you know, we need to go out and we need to capture kids early. And that's when I went, you know what can I do back in because early intervention is so important, so important. So, and literacy is the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, I have like a billion questions. I feel like I could talk to you for an hour on this topic. And like, we'll do another Q&A session. How about we do that?
Oh, no problems.
Janelle, how about you?
Yes, talking about my role, is that right, Leah?
Yeah.
And before I start, I also like to acknowledge the land on which I'm sitting on today, the land of the Walkarookabar people in Townsville, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging as well. But in my education career, I started off with Education Queensland as a classroom teacher, early childhood, and then moved into a role that was trying to stop the movement of Indigenous students moving between schools within Townsville, to try and get that continuous sort of education going at the one school rather than the settling in period. And then I moved into a role which I absolutely loved, was with the Indigenous Schooling Support Unit, who we supported students that were coming down from Cape York communities and across from Palm Island and going into boarding schools throughout Queensland. So it was my role and other people's roles to support them prepare for boarding school, because a lot of the schools in our Cape York communities only go to year 6, and they're forced to go to a boarding school, to a secondary school away from home. So it was our job to make sure that the families were prepared, the student was prepared, that the school was prepared, and then to keep them there through all of the things that you can imagine can block their education from succeeding, you know, homesickness being the biggest one. And from that, I work with Catholic schools and love what they were doing in the space of Indigenous education, and came across in a role as their Indigenous education advisor. So I still get to work with the boarding schools, but now I'm able to change policies and procedures to work in with my previous role, but also work with schools developing their RAPs, you know, embedding Indigenous knowledges into their and perspectives into the curriculum, supporting our Indigenous education workers. You know, anything to do with Indigenous education is my role. And there's 2 other Indigenous staff as well that because we have 30 schools in our diocese and we have around 10% Indigenous students within our schools, which is the highest for Queensland Catholic education. Where we're quite blessed that they put value in that, and they employ 3 of us to work with our 30 schools. So yeah.
I feel like you might need some more staff there, Janelle.
I know.
It seems like a big workload for you guys.
I know some of my schools at Mount Isa, so I come back last night on the plane from Mount Isa after being out there for the week, but just love the job. Love you know, seeing I, like you, Julia, I miss working in classrooms. I miss a classroom, but this is still rewarding because I get a bit of best of both worlds. I do get into classrooms occasionally. I work with teachers and work with community as well, you know, so that's great.
Wow, great. Thank you so much for sharing. David, how about you? You want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm on today, the Darkinjung young people, and pay my respects to our elders past and present, and acknowledge our emergent elders that are coming through our systems today. Well, my background is that I worked in public education for over 25 years as an Aboriginal consultant. Just on 13 years ago, I came across to the Catholic Schools Broken Bay when I saw the position advertised, because I saw it as a challenge. Because at that stage, I believed that Catholic Ed wasn't catering for the cultural identity of our Aboriginal students, but also not engaging our Aboriginal parents or community. So for the last 13 years, I've been working on that as the Aboriginal Education officer. With that, I've been able to employ quite a few AEWs to support me in our process of improving the education outcomes for our kids. I'm a big believer that the only way you're going to improve the education of our Aboriginal students is that one is they've got to be strong in their own cultural identity, and you cannot do it unless you got the parents as a partner in the education of their kids. But more than that, you got to create the partnerships with the teachers and the schools. So it's like a 3-way partnership. Everybody has a role and responsibility to educate our kids, but not only educate our Aboriginal students, it's about educating everybody. And the more we have Aboriginal parents and community involved within the education system, I believe the better we're going to cater for our students, but also put in that true history of what happens within their local community. And it's about creating that ongoing partnerships that I believe is the key. And I spend a lot of my time in advocating this partnership and making a genuine partnership that we work on.
Yeah. I remember when we had met, you were talking about some little, it was some cultural stuff that you did where you would take kids away for 10 days or something like that.
I'd take me Aboriginal students away on a cultural excursion for about anywhere between 10 to 16 days. And what I would tell them is where it's outside your normal excursions, mainly for the fact is as I say to them, we run it the Aboriginal way, we deal with things the Aboriginal way, and we strengthen their cultural identity. And it's about our kids finding themselves. And a part of finding yourself is being strong in your own cultural identity. A lot of our kids know they're Aboriginal, but they don't know why, because they're just told. So I see it part as my role just to give them that deep knowledge, deep understanding of who they are. And my camps, that's what the success of my camps actually do that. The kids find a sense of themselves and they find where they belong. And once you're comfortable with yourself, you can achieve everything. And I believe that as Aboriginal people working with our Aboriginal kids, if we can really strengthen our kids to be the best that they can be, then they can achieve anything. And a lot of my camps, that's the biggest outcome, is to create that education pathway, that career pathway, and the kids being strong within their own sense of identity.
Yeah. Do you find that the kids that participate in this are more engaged in their schoolwork and attendance and things like that?
They are. And some of them don't know why they've got to be at school. They're at school because they're told they've got to go to school. They're told because the school is what you have to do. Coming away on the camp, these students get a better direction as to why they should be at school, and that the school is a stepping stone for whatever pathway that they would like to pursue, whether it's career pathway, whether it's an education pathway. But it's like that connection to country. It's like that sense of belonging. And once you belong, you're much more settled and at ease with yourself. And they just find that they just get through school much more easier and comfortable because they actually feel like they belong, they fit in.
Yeah. I think the work that you're all doing is just incredible. And I think it really everything starts at school, right? Being able to read and write. I mean, one of the big focuses for me is financial literacy, because I don't really know too many people that got financial literacy at school. I don't remember. It's been a while, but I don't remember. But I think it's all about that empowerment, right? Feeling empowered to be able to do the things that you want to do in life. And I think that school builds people to be able to have careers and all that sort of stuff. But then the piece also is, once you get that job, what are you doing with the money to set yourself up for success? So I think literacy just as a whole is just so important when it comes to empowering Indigenous people, especially from childhood. So thank you so much for sharing about yourselves. Again, we could just do another Q&A session just about all the wonderful things you guys do. But thinking we've only got 40 minutes left, really, let's jump into these questions. Now, I don't really want to target these questions at anybody. I just want to ask them. And I think if you feel like you want to comment on them, comment on them. So question number one is, Reconciliation Australia are celebrating 20 years this year. And the theme is More Than a Word, Reconciliation Takes Action. So I guess in line with this year's theme, what's one practical action that a person can do to improve relationships between the Australian community and the Indigenous community?
I'll go first. I've always believed that's the ownership.
Yep.
We've got to own our history. And I always sort of get a bit offended when I go Aboriginal history, when in fact that it's our history.
Yeah.
And the more we can see that Aboriginal history as being at the forefront of the development of our country, that it belongs to us and it's ours, and they see it as ours, and then I actually think that with reconciliation we'll move forward. And the important about owning the history is still not forgetting where we've come from.
Absolutely.
Because it's the footprints we've left in the past is going to create the footprints that we're heading through to the future. So it's about owning it, not forgetting where we've come from, but moving forward together as one, because reconciliation it's about all of us. Because I believe that, the more we come together as one, the stronger as a nation we will be.
I think that's such a great point, David, owning it as our history.
Yeah.
Because even sometimes, you hear people go, oh, well, I wasn't around then. Like, that was before my time, but it is collectively our history. So I think that's such a great point.
Yeah. And it is, because like I wasn't around for the Second World War, but I do acknowledge it, and I do and I do admire people that put their lives on the line to make our country and this world a better place. And I totally respect what any of our soldiers have ever done. And like I say, but I wasn't there, but I do acknowledge it and respect them. And that's what history is all about.
Absolutely. Well said, Dave.
Yeah.
I also agree, like in regards to moving forward, you know, recognising it and then learning from the past so it doesn't happen again. And I think it's really important, like with some of the work that we're doing in regards to, you know, people throw the terms around cultural awareness, and we say, well, we can all be aware, but how can we become culturally competent? And that's a big thing. Like, yeah, we can say, yeah, we're aware that that happened, but what are we doing with that information to impact, to make sure that doesn't happen again? And I think the use of language is really, really important around reconciliation. So,
yeah.
I
agree with everything you say, and just to add to, you know, what you were saying just about that, you know, recognising our nation's history, and I really like that, Dave. I'll remember to use that, and because that's what we're trying to say, but we tend to say our First Nations history, but it's our nation's history. So thank you for that reminder. And I think just my only thing to add on is that just that deficit view people have about our culture, and about where we've come from, and, you know, all those misinterpretations and misunderstandings because they don't know our history, our nation's history, and they don't know, like you said. And I always think of Charlie Perkins as saying, you know, something along the lines of, we can't live in the past, but the past lives with us.
Yes.
That's not the exact quote, but it's something around that. So, and I think sometimes our nation thinks of all the things, you know, particularly with our voice to Parliament, our Uluru Statement, is that there's reasons why we shouldn't enact reconciliation. That's what I think the nation focuses on, and our leaders of our nation, when they should be focusing on the reasons why we should.
And I think too, like sometimes I think we can become so we rely so much on other people to educate us about stuff. So like we know, I think we all know, I mean, especially when I went to school, there was not a lot about Aboriginal history, and the accuracy of that information was really bad. But it's about now, like you have, especially in 2021, we have so much access to information. It's not so much just relying on what we hear our friends say or what we're even taught at work or school, but how do we go out and seek the right information about our history so that we can gain a better understanding too, I think is so important.
Yep. No, that's true. And the best thing about it, it's there. If you go to any your local historical societies, they've got all the information. So the information is there. It's just having the skills to seek it.
Yeah, I know that this is, you know, I know that it's different at every school. I think it's on a state level as to how much is taught in schools about our history. Have you seen an improvement in what's being taught about Aboriginal culture and history at schools?
I suppose, speaking from our diocese, but also with EQ, I suppose with the national curriculum, it's there, but whether teachers have the confidence to teach it, and that's the feedback we get. So I suppose what we do is to go in there and I suppose give them the confidence, because they're not meant to be teaching culture, they're meant to be highlighting I suppose the significance of it, you know, like being a spotlight on how things were, not even that, but, you know, just on how deadly we are, I suppose, you know, so that's part of my role, is to go into schools, and when you get to the point where you can't do anymore, and then you engage the community to come in and to share part with their knowledge and share it with the students, and particularly what you were doing, David, you know, taking them on country and giving them that connection. So, but it makes our Murray kids really proud, and Aboriginal kids really, really proud. And they just, you know, hearts just leap out, but it's also good because our other kids get to understand a bit better and take it home. Take it home.
That's so good.
Yeah. I think from our diocese at the moment, we're sort of putting out the message that you don't know what you don't know. So just ask and have the confidence to ask, because if you're coming in the sense with a good heart, a good soul, and you know, and open to the conversations, then we are definitely going to make an impact, because I think letting people know what's on their doorstep is also really, really important. Like, you know, we sit in the largest urban population, and just down the road we have what was called the Blacktown Native Institute, and we've got staff all around our schools that don't know that site is actually there, and yet we've got, and it's probably because they haven't asked those questions, and that's why we're saying ask the questions, and we can link you in. If we don't know, we'll go to community and say, hey, you know. So we've actually just recently organised to take our executive director, our RAP committee, the bishop over to the site, so they feel, they get a sense of being on and what it actually meant for that site and the trauma. Because if we don't acknowledge it, how can we ever prevent it from happening again?
And can I just add to that? Oh, sorry, David.
No, it's all good. What I was going to say is that I actually think it's taught a lot better today, because I think we've got a lot more teachers out there with the confidence to actually teach it.
Yeah.
Teachers, and they also I want to look for the true story. And I think because the teachers we have around today, the professional development has been provided for them, and they're not scared to ask the hard questions. And I think that's, especially for Broken Bay, I think that's our strength. They're not scared to make a mistake.
Yep.
And they don't want to teach the nice, warm, fuzzy stuff. Been probably Aboriginal education for many years, is they want to teach the true story, but also have that real strong local perspective. And I think also because our teachers of today have grown up in a multicultural society, they're not scared to see people of different shapes and sizes.
Yep.
Where in years ago, I think we just had that white Anglo-Saxon teachers where you just, where Aboriginal people stuck out like a sore thumb. Now we're sort of integrated like everyone else within our communities.
I think we've lost
kids want to know.
Yeah.
Our kids want to know the strengths, because on TV, you see Aboriginal people on TV all the time. And the kids are asking the questions, which adds to that inquiry learning, and our teachers teach us. So I think that's, to me, that's the strength.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you so much. So question number 2 is, can you give or share an example of what success may look like in respect to reconciliation?
I think success is where an Aboriginal person can walk into a school and they're just a parent.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not Aboriginal. They're just community. They're just, there's nothing strange about them. They just happen to be of Aboriginal descent. And I think when our parents could walk into our school and feel culturally safe, because every culture is safer than our schools, then I think reconciliation is working.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I just think just with our teachers, you know, I think a lot of teachers need to understand, and particularly with our nation's history, is that it's something to celebrate, that we are the oldest living continuous culture. We should be waking up proud every day going, wow, you know, I live in this country where this exists. And I think that success of reconciliation is, like you said before, there's a lot of teachers that are acknowledging that in their teaching, and so that parents can come into schools and be a parent and not that, oh, here comes trouble. You know?
And I think it's also bringing people on our journey, and large institutions and stuff who come with the right mindset. And for us, for reconciliation, I think we work part of the Morima Cultural Council down at Olympic Park. So our program has been developing leadership skills within our kids and to support them to be really proud of who they are and what they do. But the philosophy of the healing space, and I credit Dr. John Hunter for this, is that everybody is welcome in our space. So down there on the Parramatta River at the healing space, we have every culture represented, but we invite them in to hear the true history. And then from there, you know, in that whole positive space, that when you come and join us, everybody is welcome as long as you're coming in the right spirit of the process. And I think that's what reconciliation is for us at the moment, the success in partnering with key people like Royal Botanic Gardens and Sydney Olympic Park, and knowing that they want the true history told in their communities, in their organisations.
Yeah. So moving to kind of the perspective, less of you of teachers, but Indigenous people, I kind of want to understand how important it is that the organisations that you do business with on a daily basis, like your financial institutions, your banks, your super funds, that they're participating in this reconciliation journey.
I think it's extremely important because, you know, for our community, you know, there's a fear of institution, and they are institutions. So, you know, and we hear, I mean, you know, things that happen into our communities because, you know, people haven't always done the right things. So it's so important that institutions know how to deal with community in a respectful manner. And as Dave said before, you know, inviting people into the conversation and hearing what they need for their specific community is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because I think financial institutions and companies have such the ability to the wider community, you know, to be able to be, you know, to communicate to the wider community about, you know, I always think about our strengths, but just, you know, signs and symbols, you know, just something as basic as that, just to show First Nations people that they're welcome there. You know, they're not going to be turned away like they would have been years ago, and that's that historical, you know, fear of any sort of walking into any building. So just to have that welcome, and as David said before about, you know, just to be able to walk into a school and just be a parent and not be that, you know, that troublemaker or, you know, the person that welcome years ago, you know. So I think financial institutions need to be that as well, need to be that welcoming space, but also communicate our rich diversity and strengths and all that sort of stuff is also, I think, a step to reconciliation. Just what you're doing today, I think, is fantastic as well, you know. That's a step as well. So,
And I think being culturally safe, so people feel safe when they approach, and, you know, that fear of judgment is it's so prevalent with a lot of our families. And you know, so just to know, like Dave said, you know, an acknowledgement at the door or the flat, just those little things make such a huge impact.
You're welcome here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I agree with what everybody's saying, and also the employment of Aboriginal people in also the organisations as well. I think that's critical. And as what everybody said, they have the front office have it welcome for everybody, you know, and it's easy done. Pictures, the acknowledgement, and that just shows that the organisation is actually aware, and people just need to know when they walk to that front door, they're welcome. There's nothing worse than walking into a cold office where there's nothing. It's and you lose people before they open their mouths, but it's. I think, and also the employment of Aboriginal people, like I said before, I think that's critical.
So true. It's the first thing that I look for when I go in anywhere. I just look to see where's that welcome for our culture, for us, you know, to say that, hey, we, you know, we're engaging as well. So that's what I look for, and I love walking in there and seeing, you know, even though fair skin, but I love going in there and knowing.
Same with that.
And I think also knowing that there are organisations out there that are actively recruiting and want our kids to have all these amazing opportunities, and to show them the big picture that, hey, are you interested in finance and budgeting, or are you interested in, future planning? This is a traineeship. This is and our kids, they don't know what's out there. So the partnerships are critical, I think, so that our kids are fully aware of whatever their aspirations and goals are, there are people here to help you get there.
Yeah, and I think that's such a
financial institutions should probably go out to our schools or our careers advisors to let our kids know there's a career pathway.
Absolutely.
Great.
How many of our kids know that there's a career pathway in financial institutions? We've got all the other ones, carpentry and
yes, health.
health, but no one talks about this field. And maybe we should start to get out there and advertise that this is a great career pathway for our people, for our kids.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think in that, like having your reconciliation plan, like having internships or forms of internships, because it was back in 2000, I'm so confused about what year it is, 2019, I think it was, I presented at the Catholic Education Conference that was at the Hunter Valley. I presented on the importance of creating Indigenous leaders. Yes. And I spoke about the superannuation industry, and that from what we've been made aware, there's only 5 Indigenous people working in the industry, and it's $1 trillion industry. Wow. And the feedback that I got was, our kids don't know that these jobs exist. They don't know that there's opportunity there and stuff. So it's about organisations creating plans of employment for young Indigenous people. How do we get them in the door? How do we get them interested? Because especially if we're talking about reconciliation as well, we need Indigenous people in the workforce to help with reconciliation. So to create that culture within the organisation to participate in conversation. So I think that's, I think one of the main things too for us within Super is we look at, what does retirement look like for someone? And so, the average Joe might go, oh, I want to buy a yacht and travel around Europe for retirement. What does retirement look like for an Indigenous person? So unless we understand that, how can we cater our services to everybody? I think that, like, for us within superannuation, I think that's such a big focus. How do we have those discussions? How do we find out what you need?
And also, Leo, I think it's really important that when we have employees start, that they're mentored and that there's longevity in the position, so that they feel safe and secure, and that they play a vital role in the organisation. Because sometimes we've got kids who travel into positions, whether it's in the city or whatever, and that they feel so disconnected that it's like, you know what, this isn't for me, but yet making it feel so culturally safe and welcoming, and knowing, wow, look at your potential, look at where you can go. I think that's critical. Yeah,
absolutely. Creating that cultural safety for staff and the customers, that they feel. There's like horrible statistics around how people feel, especially the Indigenous community, when it comes to interacting with the financial institution and the financial system. I mean, the average person doesn't understand finance that well, what do I do with the credit card, and what are interest rates and all that sort of stuff. So it is also about creating that education that everybody understands. Absolutely as well.
And Leah, I'm also thinking, when we have goals and aspirations and, things to look forward to. So for our community to look forward to retirement, that actually has a ripple effect on mental health and well-being as well, because when we all have, I think that's critical too in reconciliation, in knowing that, let's set aspirations and goals and let people know, wow, I really look forward to when I retire, I can do this. And that does help with health and well-being.
It's funny you say that, because I was actually listening to a bit of Barefoot Investor
this morning,
and it's funny because it's been in my Audible book thing for ages, and I was like, everyone's been talking about it for ages. So I was like, fine, I'll listen to it. But he actually does mention the link between your mental health and your financial health and how important that is. So it's interesting that you say that, Julie.
I've got that book by my bed. It hasn't helped, but I'm trying.
Oh no, don't say that.
Oh dear.
So I think this is a really important question, because it's saying basically what from the perspective of your own journey. So thinking over your whole life, like growing up as Indigenous kids, becoming adults, on a personal level, what does reconciliation mean to you?
I'll start. It means to me, particularly being fair-skinned Aboriginal, one person said it's like an undercover Murray, being Queensland Murrays, because when you go places, people are quite openly racist, and because they feel they're in a safe place because of the fair skin. So I think for me, true reconciliation is that I can go to parties, I can go to staff meetings, I can go to anywhere and not have that fear of having to, take that big deep breath and say, excuse me, but and for me that would be true reconciliation, that people are taking part in the truth telling, are recognising our nation's history and how today it is part of systemic racism, it is part of intergenerational trauma, so many things that are happening, our rights were taken away from us, all that. So and for them to recognise that, but we're strong, we're strong, and we're moving forward and through reconciliation. So for me, true reconciliation will be reached when I can go out and not have to defend my culture, my people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point as well about skin color, because I think that's when people get confused and we get into that casual racism. Well, how Aboriginal are you?
Yeah, I
know. My big toe.
Yeah, because I expect Indigenous people to look like this and to live here and to, and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, no, you're 100% you. Like, you're 100% Aboriginal because the way you're connected to your culture and all that sort of stuff. It's not about, I'm quarter this and half of that. So.
Yeah, I think it's the old analogy about the coffee,
I was about to say that. We've just had a bit more milk.
I'm the youngest of 5, so by the time I got to my cup of tea,
Yeah, mine too. But, it's so interesting that you touch on identity because for me, true reconciliation is empowering the kids that we work with to know that it's okay. Be proud of who you are. You have a right to identify and breaking down, all that lateral violence and bullying. And I think part of the work that we do in Parramatta, and I know all my colleagues across the state do the same thing, is that everybody is welcome. Because not all of our people know their story, and we know that's a product of the stolen generation. We know all that. So, by working with our kids through their personalised learning plans, connecting them with community, getting that journey from the time they enter our schools to the time they leave, knowing that it's a safe space for them to actually be able to make those connections and feel secure in saying, I'm a really proud Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
And because I hate to say it, that the lateral violence and bullying plays a huge part on the mental health of a lot of people in our communities. And I don't want that for our students. I want them to feel that, who they are and be connected culturally, spiritually is really important.
Yeah, for me, what reconciliation for me would be the day that I can just walk in the shopping centre and people acknowledge me for who I am, not for the colour of my skin, not for my cultural beliefs, not for my religious beliefs, just for me. And then that transfers over to me kids, where they're just judged for who they are.
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
So right.
just people. And I think that's what reconciliation is to me, is just all about, that we just acknowledge for who we are, not what we are.
Yes, that's right.
Well said.
Because I think we've all seen our own, family members, our own elders, the way they have been treated, and and some days you think things haven't changed that much, but you've got to be positive, and like you said, give our kids the strength to be proud, and everybody else to be proud of them as well. I think that's what reconciliation is that everybody is proud of our kids, and us as well.
Exactly.
I feel like it's just a really slow transition. Like it's, like in some days I'm like, why are we not doing all of this right now to change Australia and to change everything? But I think the hardest thing is that everybody in Australia is on a different journey when it comes to this. To bring up like a really good example, I used to live next to this couple that were Irish, and they were sitting for their citizenship test, whatever it is, and they showed me like an example of like their study material, and there was only one paragraph on Indigenous history and culture, one out of the whole thing. That was it. And they said that they'd been walking around for the last 5 years assuming that everyone who had dark skin was Indigenous. So they were actually saying that all these people that were Kiwi and stuff like that, they thought they were Indigenous because there was no education for them upon entry into Australia. And then you have people who've received different education within Australia, private schooling, public schooling, no schooling, things like that. So we've got all these different people on these different levels, and it's about how do we bring everybody along on this journey, and that it is a slow journey. But I think if we do it right and we're consistent in the message, and hopefully when I'm 80, my grandchildren will look back and be like, oh no, things are pretty good now.
You've got a long way to your age, Leah.
I think that's what we all want.
Only in my 20s.
And like I said, I think that's what we all want, is to make it better for our kids.
Absolutely.
And but I do believe too, the only way we're going to get significant change is if it's led by our leaders.
Absolutely.
If our leaders are genuine and compassionate, then it will happen. And it's only as good as what our leaders are, and I think that's the key to reconciliation.
Absolutely.
I do have one more question I want to ask. I'm just cautious of the time here, but I think obviously this is just going to tie back into everything that we've already discussed. More on like an organizational level, what is like, I guess some advice that you'd give an organization, like say for instance us as a super fund, what advice would you give us in our journey and in our participation of reconciliation?
Consultation. Consultation with the community, genuine partnerships. And the hardest part to do is to listen and listen to what the community and the language that don't sometimes I just think sometimes we just need to speak English.
That's right.
And forget all the big fancy words, because that makes us look important.
That's right.
But I think if we can just speak English, true consultation and true partnerships and listening, to me that's the key.
Absolutely what David said, I totally agree. Yeah.
I agree too. And letting the community know that you're genuine about it, because biggest thing is trust too. Saying, we invite you in, we invite our community in, talk, and then we go, okay, there, we've done that part. It's not about that. It's truly, it's truly actually listening to what is being said and consulting all along the way.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. absolutely.
So we'll do this again in 12 months from now.
Oh, I'd love to. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. Leah, I just want you to sort me out for retirement. I've got, I'm nowhere near there.
I'll put you in touch with the financial planner.
Beautiful. I mean, I'm nearly there, but I'm nowhere there financially, so I need it.
You know what?
Too many grandkids.
It will definitely get you.
I don't have any grandkids.
Oh, no, it's probably my
Yeah.
children. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been so good talking to you. I just really appreciate the time. I'm actually sad that it's over. I still have like a billion questions, but you know what? I just really hope that maybe, in the next, 12 months or so, as things calm down with COVID, I know we think it's over and then it pops its head back up. But I'd love to come out and meet, I know you're in Townsville, but it'd be fantastic just to come out. And
now's the best time of year to be up here. I tell you, it is just beautiful.
It just hit 19 degrees here today. It's the coolest it's been.
I'm in Canberra this weekend and for that AITSL cultural competency workshop. So I've got a daughter in Canberra. It's going to be -5 or something.
Yeah, take your jacket. Yeah.
Oh. Anyway, I'll get that.
But Leah, I'm excited to let you know that actually Parramatta are hosting the conference in 2022. And and I would love to have a conversation with you about that as well. And maybe we could do some work. And you guys are, Dave, you're coming. I know you're going to be there. I would love to have everybody there. So
send me an invite. It'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'd love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for everything. I am going to end the recording now, but if you could just stay on, that'd be great. Just give me a moment.